The bank's fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, but James Carter barely noticed. His polished shoes clicked against the marble floor as he strode toward his office. A loan application clutched in his hand. Today, he'd make or break someone's dream, and he relished the power. James, a 38-year-old senior loan officer at First National Bank in Manhattan, had built his career on calculated decisions. His corner office overlooked the city's pulsing heart, a testament to his ruthless ambition. But beneath the crisp suits and practiced smiles, a quiet prejudice simmered. He'd never admit it, not even to himself. But the names on applications, names like Malik or Jamal, often landed in the high-risk pile, no matter the numbers. This morning, a new file awaited Isaiah Thompson, 32, black, seeking a $500,000 business loan. The proposal was solid. Isaiah's tech startup had promising projections, backed by a small but growing client base. Yet, as James skimmed the pages, his eyes lingered on the applicant's photo. A black man in a sharp suit, staring confidently into the camera. James's jaw tightened. He'd seen too many risky ventures fail, and something about this one felt off. Or so he told himself. By noon, Isaiah sat across from James in the sterile meeting room. The air was thick with unspoken tension. Isaiah's voice was steady, his pitch polished. But James's questions were sharp, probing for weaknesses. Your revenue projections seem optimistic, James said, leaning back. His tone clipped. What's your collateral? Isaiah didn't flinch. My company's intellectual property and a personal guarantee. The numbers speak for themselves. His eyes locked onto James's, calm but unyielding. James shifted, uncomfortable under the gaze. He didn't like being challenged, especially not here, in his domain. The meeting ended with James's curt promise to review the file. But as Isaiah left, James had already made up his mind. He typed a single word on the application, denied. The decision felt routine, just another day at the bank. He didn't know that Isaiah Thompson wasn't just another client and that this choice would unravel his world. That evening, James attended a corporate gala at a rooftop venue, the city skyline glittering below. He mingled with executives, his laughter loud, his confidence unshaken. Then the bank's CEO, Margaret Ellis, took the stage. I'm thrilled to introduce our new chief operating officer, she announced. A visionary leader who will steer First National into the future. The crowd parted, and Isaiah Thompson stepped forward, his presence commanding. James's glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. The man he'd dismissed hours ago was now his boss. His heart pounded as Isaiah's eyes found his, a flicker of recognition passing between them. In that moment, James knew this wasn't just a coincidence. It was a reckoning. Isaiah had grown up in Harlem, where dreams were hard-won and trust was scarce. At 32, he'd clawed his way from public housing to Stanford, then built a tech startup from nothing. He was used to doors slamming in his face. But James's rejection stung. It wasn't just the loan, it was the way James had looked at him, like he was less than. Isaiah had seen that look before, but it never got easier. Still, he hadn't expected the twist of fate at the gala. When he saw James's face pale, the shattered glass at his feet, Isaiah felt a surge of vindication. But he also felt something heavier: need to prove himself. Not just to James, but to everyone who'd ever doubted him. As the new COO, he had power now, but power came with choices. Would he wield it to punish, or to build? Over the next week, James's world tilted. He couldn't focus, his sleep fractured by the memory of Isaiah's steady gaze. At work, he avoided the executive floor, but Isaiah was everywhere leading meetings, shaking up protocols, his presence a constant reminder of James's mistake. Colleagues whispered about the new COO's brilliance, his charm, His vision. James felt the walls closing in. Then came the email, a one-on-one meeting with Isaiah. James's stomach churned as he entered the sleek corner office, his own office. Now Isaiah's. The younger man sat behind the desk, his expression unreadable. "James," Isaiah said, his voice calm but firm. "We need to talk about your decision on my loan." James stammered, his usual confidence gone. "It was a business decision. Nothing personal." Isaiah leaned forward, his eyes piercing. "Was it?" "Because it felt personal." He slid the loan application across the desk, the word denied glaring in red ink. "Explain this to me." James's mouth went dry. He tried to justify it, market risks. Insufficient collateral, but the words sounded hollow, even to him. Isaiah didn't interrupt, just listened, his silence more damning than any accusation. When James finished, Isaiah stood, his voice low. "You didn't see me. You saw a stereotype. And that's a problem." The meeting ended without resolution, but it left James shaken. He'd always prided himself on being fair, objective. But Isaiah's words forced him to confront the biases he'd buried deep. He thought of his father, a man who'd spoken of certain people with disdain, and how those words had shaped him, even if he'd never admitted it. Meanwhile, Isaiah wrestled with his own demons. As COO, he faced pressure from all sides: board members skeptical of his youth, employees wary of change. But James's rejection lingered, a reminder of the barriers he'd always faced. Yet there was something about James's discomfort, his fractured confidence, that intrigued Isaiah. Beneath the arrogance, he sensed a man capable of change. Or was that just wishful thinking? Their paths kept crossing. A late-night strategy session. A tense boardroom debate. Each encounter chipped away at the walls between them, revealing glimpses of vulnerability. James began to see Isaiah not as a threat, but as a man with his own scars, his own dreams. Isaiah, in turn, saw James's struggle to confront his flaws. There was tension, yes, but also a strange, unspoken pull, a connection neither could name. One evening, after a grueling day, they found themselves alone in the office. The city hummed outside, a distant pulse. James broke the silence. "I was wrong about you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry." Isaiah studied him, his expression softening. "Sorry's a start," he said, "but it's not enough. Show me you mean it." That moment marked a shift. James began to question not just his actions, but the systems that had shaped them: the bank's policies, the unspoken rules that favored some and excluded others. He started small, advocating for fairer loan assessments, but each step felt like a battle against his own past. Isaiah, too, was changing. He'd come to First National to disrupt, to prove himself. But working with James, he saw the power of redemption, not just for James, but for himself. He'd spent years guarding his heart, wary of trust. Yet James's earnest, fumbling efforts to make amends stirred something in him. Was it respect? Or something deeper? By the thousandth word, their story was no longer just about a loan or a job. It was about two men, flawed and human, navigating a world that demanded they choose between bitterness and growth. The bank was their battleground, but the stakes were personal. And as their lives intertwined, the line between rivalry and connection blurred, hinting at a bond neither had expected. Weeks passed, and the air at First National crackled with change. Isaiah's reforms swept through the bank like a storm: new diversity initiatives, revised loan criteria, mandatory bias training. Employees grumbled, some openly resistant. But Isaiah's vision was relentless. He wasn't just reshaping policies. He was dismantling a culture that had quietly favored men like James for decades. James felt the shift acutely. His colleagues, once allies, now eyed him with suspicion, as if he'd betrayed them by aligning with Isaiah. But alignment wasn't the right word. James wasn't following Isaiah, he was chasing something within himself. Each day, he pored over old loan files, wincing at the patterns he'd ignored: qualified applicants, often minorities, denied for reasons that didn't hold up. He'd been part of a machine, and the realization gnawed at him. One morning, James found a note on his desk: "Meet me at the archives. 7 p.m. IT." The archives were a dusty basement room, rarely visited. When James arrived, Isaiah was already there, surrounded by stacks of files dating back decades. "These are the bank's loan records," Isaiah said, his voice steady but charged. "Hundreds of stories like mine. People who deserved a chance but didn't get one." James hesitated, then picked up a file. A Latino woman, denied in 2005. A black couple, rejected in 2012. The reasons were vague: insufficient credit history, high risk, but the pattern was clear. "This is bigger than us," Isaiah said, meeting James's eyes. "You want to make things right? Start here." They worked late into the night, sorting through files, unearthing a legacy of exclusion. James's hands trembled as he read, each rejection a mirror to his own biases. Isaiah, too, felt the weight. He'd fought for his place in the world, but seeing the scale of injustice made his victories feel small. Yet, as they worked side by side, a quiet camaraderie formed. Their shoulders brushed as they reached for the same file, and neither pulled away. The next day, James proposed a bold idea in a board meeting: a reparative loan fund for applicants previously denied due to biased practices. The room fell silent. Margaret, the CEO, raised an eyebrow, intrigued but skeptical. "You're suggesting we admit fault?" she asked. "Yes," James said, his voice firm. "And fix it." He glanced at Isaiah, who gave a subtle nod. The board approved a pilot program, but the victory felt fragile. James knew the real test was implementation and winning over a resistant staff. Isaiah, meanwhile, faced his own challenges. His reforms were earning praise, but they also drew enemies. A senior VP, Richard Holt, openly undermined him, questioning his inexperience in private meetings. Isaiah ignored the barbs, but they fed his doubts. Was he pushing too hard? Too fast? And why did James's support quiet, steady mean so much to him? Their late-night archive sessions became a ritual. Between files, they talked not just about work, but about their lives. James shared fragments of his past: a strict father, a privileged upbringing, a marriage that crumbled under his ambition. Isaiah spoke of Harlem, of losing his brother to violence, of building a company to honor his memory. Their stories wove together, raw and unguarded. One night, as rain lashed the windows, James admitted, "I don't know how to fix this myself. The bank. Any of it." His voice cracked, and he looked away, ashamed. Isaiah reached out, his hand resting briefly on James's arm. "You're trying," he said. "That's more than most." The touch lingered, electric, and neither spoke for a moment. Something unspoken was growing, but both were too guarded to name it. The reparative fund launched, and James took the lead, reviewing applications with a scrutiny he'd never applied to his own decisions. One applicant, a black woman named Carla, reminded him of Isaiah: fierce, determined, with a business plan that deserved a chance. When her loan was approved, James felt a flicker of pride, but also guilt. How many Carlas had he dismissed? Isaiah watched James's transformation with a mix of admiration and unease. He'd seen men promise change before, only to revert when the pressure eased. But James was different. His struggle was visible, his remorse raw. And yet, Isaiah couldn't shake the pull he felt, the way his heart quickened when James smiled. It was dangerous, this feeling, in a world that judged them both harshly. By the end of the second 1,000 words, the bank was a microcosm of their inner battles. James was learning to see the world through Isaiah's eyes, while Isaiah grappled with trust and vulnerability. Their connection deepened, not just as allies, but as men who saw each other's flaws and dared to hope for more. The story wasn't just about righting wrongs, it was about two souls colliding, each reshaping the other in ways neither could predict. The reparative fund gained traction, but resistance simmered. Richard Holt, the senior VP, rallied a clique of old guard bankers, whispering about Isaiah's radical agenda. James overheard them one afternoon in the break room, their voices low but venomous. "He's turning this place into a charity," Richard sneered. "And Carter's his lapdog." James's fists clenched, but he stayed silent, knowing a confrontation would only fuel their narrative. At home, James's nights grew restless. He saw Isaiah in his dreams, not the polished COO, but the man who'd sat across from him, pitching his dream with quiet fire. The memory of that lone denial haunted him. He'd judged Isaiah without knowing him, and now, working alongside him, he saw a man who carried the weight of 1,000 rejections, yet still stood tall. James wanted to be worthy of that strength, but doubt gnawed at him. Could he really change? Isaiah, too, was unraveling. The boardroom battles were exhausting, but the real fight was internal. He'd spent years building walls against prejudice, against betrayal, against hope. Yet James was slipping through those walls. Their archive nights had become a refuge, a place where Isaiah could be himself, not the COO or the black man carrying a community's expectations. But letting James in meant risking hurt, and Isaiah wasn't sure he was ready. One evening, as they sorted files, James asked, "Why do you trust me? After what I did?" His voice was raw, searching. Isaiah paused, a file in hand. "I don't know if I do," he admitted. "But I see you trying. That's something." Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world outside the archives ceased to exist. Isaiah's heart raced, and he looked away, unnerved by the intensity. The next day, a crisis hit. Richard leaked a memo to the press, framing the reparative fund as a publicity stunt that risked the bank's stability. The article went viral, painting Isaiah as reckless and James as complicit. The board called an emergency meeting, and Isaiah faced a barrage of questions. "Are we prioritizing politics over profit?" one director demanded. Isaiah stood his ground, his voice steady. "This isn't politics. It's justice. Our past decisions hurt people. We're fixing that." James watched, awed by Isaiah's conviction, and found himself speaking up. "The fund's early results are strong," he said, citing Carla's success. "This isn't charity, it's smart business." The board relented, but the damage was done. Public opinion was split, and Richard's allies grew bolder. James confronted him in the hallway, his voice low. "You're tearing down something good." "Why?" Richard smirked. "This bank was fine before your new friend showed up. You've gone soft. Carter." The word stung, but James didn't back down. He was done being the man Richard expected him to be. That night, Isaiah invited James to a dive bar in Brooklyn, away from the bank's sterile world. Over cheap whiskey, they really talked. Isaiah spoke of his brother, killed in a drive-by when they were teens, and how that loss drove him to succeed. James confessed his fear of failure, of losing the respect he'd spent years earning. The conversation flowed, raw and unguarded, until Isaiah said, "You're not who I thought you were." "Neither are you," James replied, his voice soft. Their hands brushed on the table, and neither pulled away. The moment hung between them, fragile and charged, but the bar's noise snapped them back to reality. Back at the bank, the reparative fund faced its first real test, a public review of its impact. James and Isaiah worked tirelessly, preparing data and testimonials. Carla, the Black entrepreneur, spoke at the event, her voice trembling with gratitude. "This loan changed my life," she said. "It gave me a chance no one else would." The audience applauded, but James saw Richard in the crowd, his face twisted with disdain. After the event, Isaiah found James alone, staring at the city skyline. "You did good today," Isaiah said. "We did." James turned, his eyes searching. "I don't know if I'm doing enough. For you. For this." His voice broke, and Isaiah stepped closer, their faces inches apart. "You're doing more than you know," Isaiah said, his voice barely a whisper. The air between them crackled, but neither moved, caught in the gravity of the moment. By the third 1,000 words, their bond was undeniable, but so were the stakes. The bank was a battleground, not just for justice, but for their own hearts. James was learning to dismantle his past, while Isaiah was learning to trust again. Their story was a collision of redemption and desire, with no easy answers but the promise of something real. The bank's atmosphere grew heavier as winter settled over Manhattan. Isaiah's reforms were gaining traction, but so was the backlash. Richard's clique spread rumors, questioning Isaiah's leadership and James's loyalty. Anonymous emails circulated, accusing the reparative fund of favoring certain groups. James deleted them, but the words lingered, feeding his doubts. Was he truly an ally, or just a man trying to absolve his guilt? Isaiah felt the pressure too. The board was pleased with the fund's early success, but they demanded faster results. At night, he lay awake, replaying his confrontation with James over the loan denial. He'd been angry then, but now he saw James's remorse, his effort. It stirred something in him, something he hadn't felt since college, when he'd loved a man who broke his heart. He pushed the thought away, but it kept resurfacing, especially when James's eyes met his in quiet moments. One snowy evening, they stayed late, finalizing a report for the board. The office was empty, the city muffled by snow. James broke the silence. "I looked at my old files. You were right, I've been part of the problem for years." His voice was heavy, his eyes fixed on the desk. Isaiah leaned back, studying him. "You're not that man anymore. But it's not about me forgiving you. It's about you forgiving yourself." His words were gentle, but they cut deep. James nodded, unable to speak. As they packed up, their hands brushed again, and this time, neither pulled away. Isaiah's breath caught, and James's eyes flickered with something raw: fear, longing, hope. "Isaiah," James started, but the words died. Instead, he stepped closer, their faces inches apart. The moment stretched, electric, until Isaiah's phone buzzed, shattering the spell. A board member needed him. He left, heart pounding, wondering what might have happened. The next day, Richard escalated his sabotage. He presented falsified data to the board, claiming the reparative fund was losing money. Isaiah countered with hard numbers, but the damage was done. Doubt crept into the board's eyes. James watched, furious, and later confronted Richard in the parking garage. "You're lying to protect your own ego," James snapped. "This isn't about the bank, it's about you." Richard laughed coldly. "You think you're some hero now? You're nothing without this place." The words hit hard, but James stood firm. He wasn't fighting for his job anymore, was fighting for what was right. That night, Isaiah found James at the archives, head in his hands. "You okay?" Isaiah asked, sitting beside him. No, James admitted. I keep thinking about what you said. Forgiving myself. I don't know how. His voice cracked, and Isaiah's heart ached. He wanted to reach out, to bridge the gap, but fear held him back. Then let me help, Isaiah said softly. We're in this together. Their eyes locked, and for the first time, Isaiah let himself hope not just for the bank, but for them. The reparative fund's next phase required public outreach, and James and Isaiah traveled to community centers across New York, meeting entrepreneurs who'd been denied loans. Each story hit James like a punch, dreams crushed by decisions like his. At a Brooklyn event, a young queer black woman shared her story of rejection, her voice breaking. James felt Isaiah's gaze on him, steady and expectant. He stood and spoke, unscripted. I've made mistakes, he said, but we're here to make things right. Starting now. The crowd applauded, and Isaiah's smile was small but proud. Later, as they walked through the snowy streets, Isaiah said, You meant that. I saw it. I did, James replied, his voice thick. Because of you. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Isaiah stopped, snowflakes catching in his hair, and for a moment, they just stood there, the world fading away. Back at the bank, the board's skepticism grew. Richard's influence was strong, and rumors of layoffs swirled. James and Isaiah worked harder, their late nights blurring into early mornings. Their connection deepened, but so did the risks. Isaiah's reforms threatened the old guard, and James's support made him a target. Yet neither backed down. By the 4,000 words, their bond was a quiet fire, burning beneath the surface. They were allies, confidants, and something more, though neither dared say it. The bank was a crucible, testing their resolve, their trust, and their hearts. The fight for justice was personal now, and the outcome would define them both. Spring brought tentative hope to First National, but the air was still thick with tension. The reparative fund was showing results, small businesses thriving, communities uplifted, but Richard's sabotage persisted. He'd rallied enough board members to propose scaling back the fund, arguing it was divisive. Isaiah fought back in meetings, his voice steady but his patience fraying. James watched, torn between admiration and fear for what this fight was costing Isaiah. At home, James's life felt hollow. His apartment, once a symbol of success, was now just a place to collapse after long days. He thought of Isaiah constantly, the way his laugh broke through the bank's cold walls, the way his eyes held both fire and vulnerability. James had never felt this way about a man before, and the realization scared him. He'd been taught to bury such feelings, to see them as weakness. But denying them now felt like betraying himself. Isaiah, too, was wrestling with his heart. He'd sworn off love after his college heartbreak, focusing only on his career. But James was different, flawed. Yes, but striving to be better. Their late-night talks, their shared mission, had cracked Isaiah's armor. He caught himself watching James, noticing the way his hands moved, the way his voice softened when they were alone. It was dangerous, this pull, but he couldn't stop it. One evening, they worked late in Isaiah's office, the city a blur of lights outside. A stack of files fell, scattering papers across the floor. They knelt to gather them, their hands brushing, and this time, neither pulled away. James looked up, his eyes raw. Isaiah. He stopped, voice trembling. Isaiah's heart raced. Don't, he said, but his voice was soft, almost pleading. Not unless you mean it. Their faces were close, the air charged. James leaned in, hesitant, and Isaiah didn't move. Their lips met, brief but electric, a spark that ignited something neither could ignore. They pulled back, breathless, eyes locked. This can't happen, Isaiah whispered, but his hand lingered on James's arm. Not here. Not now. James nodded, his throat tight. I know. But I can't pretend I don't feel this. The words hung between them, a confession neither was ready to fully face. The next day, Richard struck again. He presented a petition, signed by a dozen employees, demanding Isaiah's resignation. The accusations were vague mismanagement, favoritism, but the intent was clear. James was furious, but Isaiah remained calm. Let them talk, he said. We'll prove them wrong. They doubled down on the fund, securing a partnership with a local nonprofit to expand outreach. At a community event, James met a young black man, Marcus, whose loan James had denied years ago. Marcus's business had failed, and his eyes held no forgiveness. You don't get to play hero now, he said. The words cut deep, and James realized redemption wasn't a straight pat, it was a debt he'd carry forever. Isaiah saw James's struggle and pulled him aside. You can't fix everything, he said. But you're here now. That matters. His hand lingered on James's shoulder, a silent promise. Their kiss lingered in their minds, complicating every glance, every touch. They avoided being alone, but the tension was palpable. Colleagues noticed, whispers spread, and Richard seized the opportunity, hinting at inappropriate conduct in a board meeting. Isaiah shut it down, but the damage was done. The bank was a minefield now, and their feelings were a liability. Yet they couldn't stay away. Late one night, in the archives, James broke the silence. I don't know what this is, he said, gesturing between them. But it's real, and I'm not running from it. Isaiah's eyes softened. Neither am I. But we have to be careful. They stood close, the air heavy with possibility, but the weight of their world held them back. By the 5,000 words, their love was a fragile flame, threatened by external forces and internal fears. The reparative fund was their shared mission, but their hearts were their true battleground. They were two men, caught in a system that demanded conformity, daring to redefine themselves and each other. The bank's annual shareholder meeting loomed, a high-stakes moment for Isaiah's reforms and the reparative fund. Richard's campaign had gained traction, and whispers of a board vote to oust Isaiah circulated. James felt the pressure mounting, his loyalty torn between his career and the man who'd changed him. He'd never been one to take risks, but now, every choice felt like a gamble. Isaiah, meanwhile, was exhausted. The constant scrutiny, the veiled racism, the weight of being a symbiote was wearing him down. But James's presence grounded him. Their kiss had opened a door neither could close, and though they'd agreed to keep their distance, the pull was undeniable. A glance in a meeting, a brush of hands in the elevator was enough to set Isaiah's heart racing. One morning, James found a note slipped under his office door, roof. 8 p.m. IT. The rooftop was quiet, the city sprawling below. Isaiah stood by the edge, his silhouette sharp against the skyline. I needed air, he said as James approached. This place it's suffocating. James nodded, standing beside him. I'm with you, he said, the words carrying more weight than he intended. Isaiah turned, his eyes searching. For a moment, they just stood there, the city's hum a distant backdrop. Then Isaiah reached for James's hand, their fingers intertwining. It was a small act, but it felt like defiance. We can't keep doing this, Isaiah said, his voice low. But I don't want to stop. Then don't, James replied, stepping closer. They kissed again, slower this time, the world fading away. It was reckless, but in that moment, it was worth it. The shareholder meeting arrived, and Isaiah presented the fund's results. 50 businesses funded, 80% showing growth. Communities revitalized. The numbers were undeniable, but Richard countered with fear-mongering, warning of financial instability. The board was split, and Margaret called for a vote. James spoke up, his voice steady. This fund isn't just about profit, it's about trust. We've broken it for too long. Let's rebuild it. His words swayed enough votes to save the fund, but Isaiah's position remained precarious. Richard's allies pushed for a review of his leadership, citing the leaked memo and personal conduct rumors. James knew the whispers were about them, and the guilt was crushing. Had he put Isaiah at risk? After the meeting, Isaiah found James in the archives, his face pale. "This isn't your fault," Isaiah said. "It's theirs. They're scared of change." "But I'm part of it," James said, his voice breaking. "If I hadn't denied your loan." "Stop," Isaiah cut in, his hand on James's cheek. "You're not that man anymore. I see you." The words broke something in James, and he pulled Isaiah close, their embrace a quiet rebellion against the world outside. The next day, a whistleblower leaked internal emails showing Richard's falsified data. The board suspended him, and Isaiah's reforms gained new support. But the victory was bittersweet. Rumors about their relationship persisted, and James felt the weight of eyes on them. He wasn't out, had never considered it. The thought terrified him, but so did losing Isaiah. They met at the Brooklyn bar again, the air heavy with unspoken questions. "What are we doing?" James asked, his voice raw. "This could ruin us." Isaiah's eyes were steady. "Maybe. But I'd rather risk that than live a lie." His words hit James hard, forcing him to confront his own fears. He'd spent his life conforming, but Isaiah made him want Moretto be brave, to be true. By the 6,000 words, their love was a quiet revolution, fragile but fierce. The bank was changing, but so were they. James was learning to face his fears, while Isaiah was learning to trust his heart. Their story was no longer just about justice, it was about two men daring to love in a world that demanded they hide. Summer brought a fragile calm to First National. Richard's suspension lifted a weight, but the board's review of Isaiah's leadership loomed. James and Isaiah worked tirelessly, their days filled with meetings and their nights with stolen moments. Each touch, each glance, was a risk, but it was also a lifeline. They were falling in love, and neither could deny it. James was changing in ways he hadn't expected. He volunteered at community events, listening to stories of resilience that humbled him. One evening, he met Marcus again, the man whose loan he'd denied years ago. Marcus was rebuilding, his new business thriving. "I heard what you're doing," Marcus said, his tone softer. "Keep going." The words were a small absolution, but they meant everything. Isaiah, too, was evolving. He'd always been guarded, but James's vulnerability disarmed him. He shared more stories of his mother's strength, his dreams for a world where no one was judged by their skin or their love. But the board's review weighed on him. If they found evidence of his relationship with James, it could end his career. Yet he couldn't walk away. One night, they escaped to a cabin upstate, a rare weekend away from the bank's chaos. By a crackling fire, they talked about their fears, their hopes. "I've never done this," James admitted, his voice soft. "Loved a man. Loved anyone like this." Isaiah smiled, his hand tracing James's. "Me neither. Not since." He trailed off, the pain of his past lingering. But then he leaned in, and they kissed, the world falling away. For those 2 days, they were just James and Isaiah, not banker and boss, not symbols of a larger fight. Back in Manhattan, reality crashed in. A board member confronted Isaiah with a photo taken at the Brooklyn bar, showing their hands touching. Care to explain? The director asked. Isaiah's heart sank, but he didn't flinch. That's personal, he said. My work speaks for itself. The director wasn't satisfied, and rumors spread faster. James overheard colleagues whispering, their words laced with judgment. He wanted to protect Isaiah, but he felt powerless. That night, he found Isaiah on the rooftop, staring at the city. They're coming for me, Isaiah said, his voice flat. Then we fight, James said, stepping closer. Together. Isaiah's eyes softened, and they stood there, hands clasped, defiant against the storm. The board's review was brutal. Isaiah presented the fund's success, but questions about his conduct dominated. James watched, his heart in his throat, as Isaiah stood tall, refusing to apologize for who he was. When it was James's turn to speak, he didn't hesitate. Isaiah's the best leader this bank has ever had, he said, and I stand with him personally and professionally. The room fell silent. James's words were a declaration, not just of support, but of love. Isaiah's eyes met his, gratitude and fear mingling. The board postponed their decision, but the message was clear. Their relationship was no longer a secret. That night, James and Isaiah walked through Central Park, the city alive around them. You didn't have to do that, Isaiah said, his voice thick. Yes, I did, James replied. I'm done hiding. They stopped by the lake, and James took Isaiah's hand, no longer caring who saw. It was a small act, but it felt like freedom. By the 7,000 words, their love was a beacon, guiding them through the chaos. The bank was a battleground, but they were no longer fighting alone. James was embracing his truth, while Isaiah was finding strength in vulnerability. Their story was a testament to love's power to heal, even in a world that tried to tear them apart. The board's decision came on a crisp September morning. Isaiah was cleared to remain COO, but the vote was close, and the warning was clear: no more distractions. The reparative fund was fully funded, a victory for their mission, but the cost was high. James and Isaiah were under scrutiny, their relationship an open secret. Yet they refused to hide. James moved out of his sterile apartment, renting a small place in Brooklyn closer to Isaiah's world. He came out to his family, his voice shaking as he told his sister over coffee. She hugged him, tears in her eyes. I'm proud of you, she said. The words were a balm, easing years of fear. Isaiah, too, was finding peace. He visited his mother in Harlem, telling her about James. She listened, then took his hand. You deserve to be happy, she said. Don't let anyone take that from you. Her blessing meant everything, grounding him as he navigated the bank's politics. They faced the world together now, their love a quiet defiance. At a community event, they stood side by side, celebrating the fund's impact. Carla, the entrepreneur, approached them, her business now thriving. You gave me a chance, she said. Thank you. James felt Isaiah's hand brush his, a silent reminder of why they'd fought. But the bank wasn't done with them. A new VP replaced Richard, but the old guard's influence lingered. Policies were questioned, budgets tightened. James and Isaiah knew the fight wasn't over, but they were ready. They'd learned that justice wasn't a destination, it was a journey, one they'd walk together. One evening, they sat on their Brooklyn stoop, the city alive around them. We did this, Isaiah said, his voice soft. We changed something. We're still changing, James replied, his hand finding Isaiah's. You changed me. They kissed, unhurried, the world no longer a threat but a canvas for their future. Their story ended not with a grand gesture, but with a quiet truth. Love and justice were intertwined, each strengthening the other. James, once a man of prejudice, had found redemption through Isaiah's courage. Isaiah, once guarded, had found trust through James's growth. Together, they'd reshaped a corner of the world, proving that even in a system built to divide, two hearts could build something whole. By the 8,000th word, their journey was complete, not perfect, but meaningful. They were two men, black and white, queer and proud, who'd faced their flaws and chosen love. The bank was just the beginning. Their legacy was the lives they'd touched, the barriers they'd broken, and the bond that held them together, a love that refused to be denied.